Hey guys, so in today's video we're going to be trying to extract more performance out of the Ender 3 V2. Currently, as far as reliability and the level of prints that it's producing is just about flawless. There's nothing more that can be done to it mechanically, in my opinion, to make it any better. It's completely reliable. The hot end gives absolutely no problems. And of the different hot ends that I've used, the one that I found that has been the most reliable and very consistent is the E3D V6 all metal hot end. This hot end has just been dynamite from the first day that I've installed it on the printer. This printer's got thousands of hours of printing on it, and I haven't had one maintenance issue with the hot end. No nozzle replacements, nothing. It's just been flawless. Another awesome upgrade that I did to it was the dual gear extruder from Micro Swiss. Again, fantastic performance, no skipping, nothing, just perfect. Currently we're running gyres firmware on it, and in my opinion I feel that this is the limiting factor. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the steps of installing Klipper onto the Ender 3 V2. And there's a lot of videos out there that are very good on doing this. Nero 3D's got a lot of information on Klipper, as well as Teaching Tech has some really good videos on installing Klipper on the Ender 3. Now, one thing that I didn't see a lot of videos on was installing Mainsail OS, which is the graphic user interface, over Klipper. I've seen Fluid and I've seen Octoprint as the graphic user interface, but we're going to install Mainsail OS. I like the way that the layout of the software is, and I think you guys will enjoy it too. So let's get started. One thing that is very important is to get some type of a reference. So what I did is I jumped onto Cura and imported a 3D Benchy, and I cranked up the speed in the Cura profile to the max for the Ender 3 V2, which is 150 millimeters per second, just so that we can get a baseline of 3D Benchy that we can compare against the 3D Benchy that we're going to produce using Klipper. So this is the one that we printed up. And let me zoom in here close so you can see. So this is on the setup currently the way that it is. Running the gyres firmware, and you can see that it does have some issues with stringing, some under extrusion it looks like, and just a few little problems with this Benchy. So I think that we can improve on this. I think the software is going to be the key. A couple of things that Klipper has that gyres and most of these other firmwares don't have is pressure advance. And what pressure advance does is more efficient extrusion around corners and turns, which is going to eliminate a lot of this stringing. And one more thing also is input shaping. If you look very closely here at this, at the little porthole here at the front, you can see those little rings in front of the porthole. That is a result of vibration that is transferring from the printer's movements into the print. Input shaping gives us a way to counteract these vibrations and eliminate them from the printed model. So guys, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turn on your notification bell, and leave me some comments. I love the comments and do my best to get back to you guys as soon as I see them. All right, so let's jump onto the computer. What I did is I created a document that we can use to follow along all the different steps that are going to be needed to installing Klipper. So let's jump over there and we'll go from there. To simplify the process here, what I did, guys, is I created a document, and this document is going to help us install Klipper pretty fast. So let's go ahead and open it, and I'll include all the files in the video description. That way you guys can install Klipper on your Ender 3 V2. Now this is specific to the Ender 3 V2, so just make sure that if you use any of the flash files or anything like that, it'll only work on the Ender 3 V2. So let's start by opening up the flashing guide, and What I did essentially is to grab different pieces from the Klipper documentation, the Mainsail OS documentation, to put together one file that has all the steps all included in it instead of having you jump around all over the place. And I found that this works very well. I've done it already on a couple of my machines following this process, and it works great. So first thing you need to do is to download the Raspberry Pi imager. You are going to need a Raspberry Pi, either Raspberry Pi 2, Raspberry Pi 3, Raspberry Pi 3B+, Raspberry Pi 4. One of those is going to be needed for this process. You're also going to need a USB cable to plug the Raspberry Pi into your Ender 3 V2. So just click the download link. The document's got all the download links in it. And I'm using Windows. I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to download it again. And we're going to launch the Raspberry Pi imager. And if we scroll down in the document, it's going to tell us that we need to choose an OS, and it specifies that we need to look for the one that says Other Specified Purpose OS. So we're going to do that. Next is to select 3D printing. And finally, we're going to click on Mainsail OS. And then the current Mainsail OS version at the time of this video is 0.7.0. Next thing is to select the storage device. And then we're going to click on the little cogwheel here. That's going to open up some additional settings that we're going to need to adjust. First is going to be the host name. We're going to set it to Mainsail OS. We're also going to want to click here where it says Enable SSH. In this section, we're going to need to put in the Pi password. Don't change the username. If you look at the documentation, it specifies don't change the username, so we're not going to change that. And the password can be whatever you want. This is going to be the password that you're going to use to log into your Mainsail OS session along with your Raspberry Pi. Next thing is to configure your wireless LAN if you're going to be using a wireless LAN. It picked up my wireless network automatically. If it doesn't for you, just type it in this field up here and then put in your wireless network password. In this next section, it talks about your wireless LAN country. It's currently set at Great Britain. That's fine. You don't need to change that if you don't need to. I'm going to go ahead and set my local settings, and it happens to be the right one for me, Central Time. Once you have all those settings set, just click on Save and then click on Write. Now it's going to prompt you to tell you that it's going to erase everything on your SD card, so make sure that you don't have any important files on there. Click Yes. And this will take some time to finish. If you guys get a pop-up like this, just click the X. All right, now that our image is done, we're just going to click on Continue and take our card out of the card reader and install it in the Raspberry Pi. Now guys, it doesn't matter that the Raspberry Pi is plugged in and that the gyres is still on the printer. That part doesn't matter. So now we're going to go back to the computer and make sure that the Raspberry Pi can communicate to the motherboard. And this will make sure that the cable connection between the Raspberry Pi and the motherboard is good. Close out this Raspberry Pi imager. Now if you scroll down to the next page, we're going to need to download the wireless network watcher, and there's links in the document. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and select the appropriate one for your operating system. I already have it installed, so I'm just going to launch it. And what this is going to do is this is going to find our IP address for our Raspberry Pi. And how you know that it's the right one is it'll say Mainsail OS. So just wait for that to pop up. And there it is here at the bottom. So just write down this IP address. And what we're going to do is we're going to open the browser. And type it in. It may take a minute to connect because the Raspberry Pi is still expanding the file system. So if you get a connection failed, just click try again. And now that we're connected to the Raspberry Pi, next thing we need to do, we got some errors here that we got to take care of. But before we do any of those, head over here to this little wrench machine icon and click it. And on the bottom right, where it says Update Manager, there's an area here. It says Update All Components. Go ahead and click that. And it's going to take a few minutes. And once it's done, it's going to restart the Mainsail OS session. And you may get a connection failed error. But once you see that error, just click try again, and it's going to reconnect. And now we can close the Update Manager. All right, let's head back to our document and see what we got to do next. The next thing that we need to do is to create the flash file to flash the Klipper .bin to the 3D printer. So let's go ahead and open up a PuTTY session. To do that, we're going to have to download PuTTY. So in this previous page, there's two download links. One of them is for PuTTY and the other one is for WinSCP. We're going to need both. So let's grab the PuTTY first. Select the appropriate one for your operating system. Again, I already have it, so I'm not going to download it again. And then the next thing is WinSCP. So go ahead and click on that. Download the appropriate one. And then we're going to start with PuTTY. So let's go ahead and open PuTTY. Double click it. And you're going to enter the same IP that the wireless network watcher gave us. So I'm going to go ahead and type it in here. You're going to get a potential security breach if you're running any kind of Windows antivirus. Just go ahead and click yes. The login is going to be lowercase p, lowercase I. Enter. The password is whatever password you selected in the Raspberry Pi imager screen. Once you're logged in here, we're going to copy and paste lines from the document directly into the PuTTY session. So just click, drag, copy, right click. And then with PuTTY, all you're going to do is just right click right on this little green box and it'll paste it for you. Press enter. And then we're just going to copy and paste, copy and paste. Now on this screen, what we're going to do is we're going to enter the information that we're going to need to configure the flash tool to flash the particular board that we're using. So if you look at the instructions here on the right, we need to use the arrow key to come down to microcontroller architecture, then use the right mouse arrow or the right keyboard arrow, down arrow till you get to STM microelectronics STM32, and then use the right space bar to select it. And it's already pre-selected the proper processor model. But then we got to go down to the next field, which is the bootloader offset, and we got to change that. So go ahead and arrow down, use the arrow right to select it, and then arrow down to 28 KIB bootloader, press the space bar, and then we got to change the communication interface. So arrow down, arrow right, and we need to select serial on UART PA10/PA9. So arrow down, space bar, and okay, so now we're good to go. Next thing we need to do is to press the Q on the keyboard, and then Y. All right, so now we have the configuration saved. Next thing we got to do is to create the flash file. So scroll down in the document. We're going to copy this next line, which is make, and then it's going to compile our firmware for us. All right, once that's done, we need to make sure that the Raspberry Pi is communicating with the printer. So how we can do that is to copy this next line and paste it into the terminal. And if you get a response like this that says serial by ID, then that means that the Raspberry Pi is talking to the control board on the printer, which is good. Next thing we need to do is to bring the flash file over to our computer so that we can put it on an SD card. And we're going to need another piece of software for that. That's where the WinSCP comes in. So let's go ahead and launch that. We're going to enter the same IP address for a Raspberry Pi. The port number you can leave the same. The username is going to be lowercase p, lowercase I. And the password is the password that you created previously. Click login. And again, you're going to get this potential security breach. Just click update. Once you're in WinSCP, what you're going to do is you're going to double click into the Klipper folder and double click where it says out, and you want to download this clipper.bin file. How you do that is you can click on it, come up here to right above this menu here, click download, and select wherever you want to download it. So I'm just going to put it on the desktop. Click OK. And then we can minimize this for now. Go ahead and put your SD card in the card reader and copy your clipper.bin to it. All right, once that's done, let's head over to the printer, load the SD card. So shut off your printer. And then turn your printer back on. And Klipper doesn't use the display screen, so the display screen will not work. You know, it may backlight, but that's all it's going to do. So you can leave it on, or you can unplug it. That's up to you. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it alone for now. And let's head back to the computer and see if we can connect to the printer. In this next step, we're going to update some of the files that are on the Raspberry Pi. So let's go back to our PuTTY terminal. And we're going to copy the following lines one at a time and enter them into PuTTY. So right click, copy, paste, enter. And let's follow the prompt. So it's asking us for our password. Let's put our PuTTY password in there. Press enter. Then let's copy the next line. Yes, enter. All right, copy the next line. Now this is telling us that we already have this program in here, but that there's an update. So let's go ahead and update it. Copy the next line, paste it. Okay, let's go to the next page in the document. Now in this section, we're going to be installing the software that's going to control the accelerometer. You guys may not have the accelerometer yet, but you're going to want to install this piece of software. So let's follow these instructions and do that now. So we're already on the Klipper directory, so we don't need this first line. So let's skip over to the next one. Right click, paste. Select the next one. Paste and enter. And then we need to build a microcontroller code. So again, we're already in the Klipper directory, so we don't need to do this first line. Pick the next one, make menu config. And this will be familiar because we did this a little while ago. But this time we're going to change the microcontroller architecture to Linux. So use the arrow down once, and then the right arrow down to where it says Linux process. Press the space bar, press Q, press Y, and on to the next step. So copy this next line, paste, next line, all right, next line, and now in this next section we got to enable SPI. So again, let's copy this information here, paste it. And in this section, what we got to do is we got to go down to where it says interface options. So use your arrow key, interface option, and then use the enter key. Use your down arrow to go to P4 SP1 or SPI. Press enter. And it's already selected for yes. Press enter again. And already OK is ready to go. Press enter. And that's it, we're done. So now you're going to press tab again, Press enter, and we're finished with this step. All right, so now let's go back to the Mainsail OS interface. So let's pull that up, and right now it's telling us that the printer.cfg file is missing. So we're going to have to put that into Klipper. So how we're going to do that is down here where it says machine, click on it. And there's a little upload file icon at the top. Click it. And I'm going to include this in the video description. So it's going to be, all these files will be there. The one we're looking for is printer.config. And this is my pre-configured printer.config. So if you're using an Ender 3 V2 and you're running a CR Touch, then this file will work for you perfectly. You can also use a BL Touch so long as it's a newer one. Some of the older BL Touches have different settings, but if it's a current BL Touch or CR Touch, this printer config will work perfectly for you. So let's double click it and look inside. And one thing that's very important that we change here is if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's this field here that says save config, and then it says do not edit this block or below. And right below that, there's the BL Touch Z offset. If you happen to know your Z offset before flashing your printer, you would go ahead and put your Z offset in this field. That way it can save you some time, and we don't have to go through the next step. But if you change your nozzle or do any work to your hot end, you are going to need to know how to set your Z offset. So let's go ahead and do that next. So whenever you're in here, if you make any changes, first thing you need to do is click on Save and Restore once you're done. But before we do that, I want to show you something. If you don't have a BL Touch, but you want to use the Klipper software, what you can do is you can comment out the BL Touch section. So if you look right here where it says BL Touch, you can click to the left of that little bracket there, and then put a pound sign there. So if you do that, it disables it. Now, if you're going to do it for the BL Touch, you got to do all of the things associated with a BL Touch. So it would look something like this. And then you're also going to have to come down here to where it says Stepper Z. And you're going to have to comment out this one where it says Probe Z Virtual End Stop. That applies to the BL Touch or CR Touch. You would have to comment that one out, and you would have to uncomment these ones below it. So that would be the configuration if you are not using a CR or BL Touch. In my case, we are, so we're going to put these back. All right, and then we're going to click Save and Restart. All right, so now if you notice, we don't have any errors here. If we go to our dashboard, we should see a toolhead information. So this tells us that our printer is properly configured and everything is ready to go. So let's head back to our document. I'll show you guys how to set the Z offset. So in this page here, page 21, there's the Calibrate Probe Z offset. What we're going to do is copy this first command here. Head over to your Mainsail OS session, and over on the bottom right here, there's a little console box. You can just click on the console box, right click, and paste this in there. But before we do this, we got to home the printer. So anytime you do anything that has to do with moving the printer, and these boxes over here are orange on the left side, you need to home everything first. So before we enter here, we're going to click home all. And once all of these boxes in this section are blue, then we can go ahead and do our probe calibrate. So now in this box, we can go ahead and click either this little arrow to the right to send the command, or you can just press enter. Now it's currently telling us that our Z position is 5.9 millimeters, which is way too high. So we're going to need to drop that down. And how we can do that is to head over back to the document. And over here I have these test Z different ones. So since we're just about 6 millimeters too high, I'm going to start by using this first command, which is test Z space Z equals -3 millimeters. So that's going to bring the tool head down 3 millimeters. So I'm going to copy that and paste it into here and send it. And that's going to lower the tool head. And if you look here, it's telling us now that our tool head is 2.938 millimeters off the bed. Let's go look at our printer and see what it looks like. Now what I like to do here is I like to use a feeler gauge for this. So I'm going to use a 0.15 feeler gauge. And you got to make sure that your nozzle is clean. So if you got any kind of filament that's oozing out the bottom of the nozzle, you got to warm up the nozzle and clean that off first. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up there. And now back at the computer, I'm going to go ahead and lower it using the test Z. But this time, instead of lowering it by 3 millimeters, I'm going to lower it 1 millimeter at a time. And now I'm going to check it. And that's actually perfect right there. So if you needed to bring it up or lower it a little bit more, you can use the test Z and just change those values in there. Currently I have it set at 1 millimeter, so it drops down 1 millimeter. But what you can do is, if let's say I would have dropped it down and it would have been pinching that feeler gauge, then what you can do is test Z space Z equals, and then put a plus and no value after the plus and press enter. And what it'll do is it'll raise it half the amount that it just finished lowering. So that's kind of cool to kind of hone in on that sweet spot. And it's a good tip to remember. All right, so since we're set here, we're going to go ahead and take our feeler gauge out of here. We're going to go back to our Klipper session, and we're going to go ahead and save that setting. So let me show you how to do that. All right, so once we're happy with it, what we can do is you can put accept here. So just type in accept. And then it's going to tell you, okay, we got this value in here. Do you want to save it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this save underscore config, paste it in here, and then I'm going to press the send. And now what this is going to do is it's going to save that to the printer.config file. So I'm going to go ahead and press send. It's going to restart the Mainsail OS interface. And then if we go to our machine setting and we look at our printer config, if we go all the way down to the bottom, you see that the BL Touch setting now is different than it was before. Before it was 0.94. Now, one thing to remember with, one thing that's a little bit different with Klipper than the other mainstream firmwares is that the Z offset is not expressed in a negative number. It's always going to be a positive number. So for example, if your previous Z offset was, let's say, negative 0.94. In Klipper, you would enter it as just 0.94. You don't want to use any negatives because it doesn't work like that with Klipper. But anyhow, that's how you do it. Now, my Z offset, once I fine tuned it, it was actually 0.94. So I'm going to go ahead and put 0.94 back in here. And that's the one that worked best for me. And then anytime you make any changes in here, you got to save and restart. All right, now let's go back to our document. All right, now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our first bed mesh. And I already have the bed mesh information already in Klipper. So all you got to do is just follow this guide to create the bed mesh for your particular machine. So let's go back to Klipper. We're going to start with a G28, which is a home all, where you can press this little home all icon here. It's going to do the same thing. But I'm going to go ahead and copy this next command, which is bed mesh calibrate. Let's go back to Mainsail OS. Click on the dashboard. And then over here on the bottom right where it says console, we can put our command in there to build the bed mesh. But before we do that, we got to home the printer. So go ahead and click home all. And now that the printer is ready, we're going to go ahead and send this bed mesh calibrate command. All right, so if you can see here, we got a message that says bed mesh state has been saved to profile default. And it's telling us save config command will update the printer config file. So we want to do that. Let's copy that. Paste it into the console and send it. It's going to save it to the printer config and restart Mainsail OS. All right, now let's go back to our document, see what we got to do next. Okay, so this part is important. What we're going to do here is make sure that our Cura is set up to load the bed mesh before every print. So I'll include in the video description my start G code, but you can also grab it all from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Cura. You want to click up here where it says settings, printer, and go down to where it says manage printers. Click on machine settings. And in this section here, you want to make sure that you have this line, these lines right here, this line right here. That's bed mesh profile load equals default. And what you can do is go back to the document and you can just grab all of this G code right here. Right click, copy it. Select everything that you have in your start G code. Make sure you back it up somewhere in case you decide that you want to go back to your original one. And then just paste the new G code right in there. For me, it's the same G code, so it didn't change anything. And that's it. Go ahead and close. Close again. And then let's go back to our document. Last thing we need to do is to enable Cura support for Mainsail OS's connection. And that's pretty easy to do. What you're going to do is go to the video description. And I'm going to have this Moonraker connection.zip folder in there. And what that has in it is it just has a few files. So what you're going to do is right click on this. When you unzip it, it's going to have two. It's going to have two like a folder and a subfolder. But you don't want to grab this one here. you want to get the next one. So actually what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to grab these files here. And put them in here. And then I'm going to get rid of this folder. All right. So right now you got Moonraker connection. Double click it, and there's the files in there. Perfect. So what you want to do here is right click and copy it. And then you want to go into your C drive and go to where the your Ultimaker Cura is located. So in my case, it's Program Files. Ultimaker Cura, I'm using 4.13.1. And in here where it says Plugins, double click it. And then you're going to right click and paste Moonraker connection. I already have it in here, so I'm not going to do it again. But if you double click it, you can see it's the same files. And then you're going to restart Cura. So once you restart Cura, then you should have that that feature enabled. So let's go back to Cura and check it. All right. So let's go ahead and load up a model. And I'm going to show you how cool this Mainsail OS is. All right, so we'll just select this Benchy here. Click Upload. All right, it's successfully uploaded. All right, and we're done with this part. Okay, let's keep going with the document and see what else we got to do. Okay, we need to do a PID calibrate. So I print with PETG. So for me, I like to print at 230 with PETG. So I'm going to copy this. Let's go back to the Mainsail OS. And in the console, we want to paste that. And then send it. So this will take a few minutes to complete. Just like before, when the PID tuning is complete, you got to copy this save_config and paste it into the console. Send it. And it's going to restart Klipper. All right, let's go back to the document. And the next thing would be to PID calibrate the bed. So again, copy this. And since I print with PETG and I'm printing on a Garolite G10 build plate, the best temperature for me is 80 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to use that value. If you need to if you need a different value, you can change it before sending this command to Klipper. But I'm going to leave mine like this. So send it. And just like before, it's going to take a few minutes. All right. Save and config. And if it was a command that you had used before, you can up arrow. Let's see if the up arrow works for me. Yep. So you can use the up arrow to recall the previous macros that you ran. So save config, enter. All right, while it's doing that, let's check, see what we got to do next. Rotation distance. So this is to configure your E-steps. And I'm going to go ahead and go over this in more detail in another video, but just to give you an idea. So I went ahead and put some examples in here so you guys could see how this works. So if you wanted to determine what your rotation is, from E-steps, the conversion is 3200 divided by your E-steps gives you your rotation. So for example, the factory E-steps for an Ender 3 V2 is 93. So if we take 3200 and divide that by 93, you get 34.408. So 34.408 would be the rotation. So this is converting E-steps to rotation, which is what Klipper uses. And there's details in here in case you're using a like a pancake style stepper motor that would use different values. But let's say, for example, that you needed to change your E-steps. If you go down to the second page here, they include the formulas for changing the E-steps. All right, so let's all right, so that's the end of the document right there. So let's go back to the Mainsail OS. And once again, let's go down to the machine icon here. And let's look at our printer config. So if you notice now, we have a bunch of these different versions of printer config. The one that Klipper uses is the one that doesn't have anything except printer.config. These others are backups. So every time you make a change to your printer config, it automatically generates a backup. It'll have the date and the time and military time. So let's open printer config and let's see what the changes are. So if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, what you guys are going to see is before we just had the BL touch with the offset, and now we have all these other things in here. So this is our bed mesh. These are all the measurements and all the different points. And then we have the bed mesh details, and then the PID information. So this is super cool here. One thing that I really like about Klipper is that you can make changes very fast. So for example, if you wanted the max temperature to be 350 or 400 or whatever it is, all you got to do is just change it here. Click save and restart, and you're done. You're not having to recompile firmware or messing around with any of that stuff. Anyway, it's super cool. I'm super excited about it. Now this printer.config that I'm including already has the accelerometer all ready to go. It already has the values based on my testing for the input shaper. And then if you go over here to where it says extruder, there's pressure advance. So the pressure advance is already set for an Ender 3V2 using a Bowden tube. If it's running a Capricorn Bowden tube, I found that this value 1 works perfect. If you're using a direct drive, this value will be different. So you're going to have to go through the Klipper documentation to go through the steps of printing a test part to determine what value would be best for a direct drive setup. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for this part of it. Let's go ahead and print our Benchy. So one cool thing about Mainsail OS is that when you go into the files section, so this is what I mean, guys. Check this out. Pretty cool, right? So it includes the picture of the Benchy, and that's because of that Cura plugin that we added. And then all the files will be located in here once it's done. If you needed to stop the print, you can click the pause print, and then once you do that, it'll give you the option to cancel the print. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the camera on the printer so we can watch the 3D Benchy print at 150 millimeters per second. Alright guys, so let's compare the two benchies. So you can see here, this is the first benchy. And you got a lot of stringing. And this was the same G code, the same exact G code I used on the same printer. One was with the gyres firmware, and the next one is with Klipper. So you can see that over here it looks like under extrusion. If you look at the little port here, you got ringing. And then we'll compare it to this benchy. See here that we don't have the ringing. No stringing. No under extrusion. So for me, what I think is the biggest benefit here is that you have a much more powerful processor to process the G code, and it can process the G code at a faster rate. So I think that's what happened here, because the hardware is exactly the same. There's no difference in the hardware. The only thing that changed really is the speed at which it can process the G code, the pressure advance, which Klipper has pressure advance, gyres does not. Klipper also was using input shaping, so the input shaping values are in the printer config that I'm going to upload and include along with the files in the link. So yeah, I think this is definitely a worthwhile upgrade. I would definitely recommend it. You can see here just by this example, so you can print way faster than 50 millimeters a second with an Ender 3v2. And I've seen these things print even faster. I just can't figure out how to get Cura to. Guys, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. Turn on your notification bell. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and leave some comments. I love the comments and do my best to respond as soon as I see it. All right, guys. Till next time. Take care.